shots of Mikey that suggests that he's made a decision of some sort, and that he's committed to a course of action. And we're going to find out in this episode that course of action is that he is going to serve Wynn lunch and ask him about Grady Hale. And then once he does that, get Wynn to admit that he was the one who sold out Grady Hale. And Wynn says, yeah, absolutely, I did. And he says, you want to survive in this business, you either die, get killed, you snitch, or you go to jail. It's one of those three things if you're in this business long enough. And he doesn't want to go to jail, and he doesn't want to be dead, so he snitches. And it's a very sort of practical outlook on things, and Mikey does not care for it. But when Wynn says that, Mikey bashes his head into the table to stun him, and then handcuffs him to the table and the chair. And then he disarms him. And I love the sequence where he disarms him, because he's got two guns, a switchblade, and a blackjack he's got hidden on his person.
Yeah.
Like the Terminator.
Who among us has never had two pistols on?
Like you're in a John Woo movie?
Piece? Yeah. You need the shoulder holsters. I do, speaking of The Wire, I mean, that was the same thing that they had with Omar. He said, or Omar. Yeah, it was like, you must have a code.
Yeah.
A code.
Yeah. Code. We only rob bad people.
Yeah.
So Mikey disarms him, disables him, and calls Catherine Hale and says, hey, I've got something you might be interested in. So, and we'll talk about what's going on with Catherine when that call happens, but and why she doesn't answer the phone. While all this is going on, Raylan and Tim are watching the armored truck theater that they're doing to allegedly move the money to Charlotte, which is actually not going to be filled with money. They're watching Earl watch the truck, and they're watching for Boyd or Carl or somebody else to come. And Raylan says to Tim, hey, you know what? I think Boyd might be too smart for this. And Tim says, what are you talking about? You're the one who set all this up. You're the one who, has orchestrated this whole thing. We're pulling strings on puppets in three different places. And now you're telling me that this isn't going to work. And Raylan says, hey, yeah, look, the last time we thought we had Boyd in something like this, we got his dirty underwear. And he's absolutely right. That's the first episode of the season with Dewey, where he breaks Dewey's jaw. Still never forgive Raylan for that. That seemed unnecessary. But yeah, so he says, I think he's too, I don't think he's going to fall for it. I don't think he's going to come after it. And then we see a scene with Boyd and Carl and Ava, and Carl's packing for the armored car robbery, and he and Ava have a conversation, and then he takes off for the robbery, and Boyd says he'll be right behind him. I have a clip of that conversation.
My uncle, you sure he couldn't have made it out of that mine?
You really want to waste your time worrying about that traitor?
The reason I'm worried, if he's alive, there's a chance he could come back and finish the job.
Even if he survived the blast, the rockfall cut him off from the entrance. Crazy bastard. Ran the wrong way. Probably got turned around in the dark. Everything looking the same down there and all.
Exactly right, I got turned around.
Carl, we all set, my man?
Good to go.
Woo! You best be getting a move on, son.
We ain't riding together?
Well, I got something I gotta do. I'm gonna be right behind you.
All right.
Maybe I need you to head back to your place, pick up whatever Limehouse has sorted for us, new papers, a car nobody's looking for. I'll be in touch and tell you where to meet me.
Somewhere close to where you're hitting the truck?
Ain't no money gonna be in that truck.
But you just told
I know what I told Carl.
What about Earl? He's still halfway a kid and you're serving them up.
I'm just trying to make sure that we don't get served up, Ava.
How do you know the money won't be in the truck?
Because he's too smart for that.
Markham?
Raylan! Now don't ask me any more goddamn questions! Just trust me. Meet me.
So I think, there's kind of two sort of important pieces of the puzzle that come together in those two little conversations. The first is Ava is realizing that Zachariah is still out there somewhere. And for her, Zachariah represents a potential lifeline. And so she's now started to put two and two together, like, okay, Zachariah is still out there. He's someone I can trust. And someone he can trust when everyone else in her life is proving themselves to not be trustworthy. And that's what Boyd then immediately does. By selling out Carl and Earl, you can see Ava's calculus going on in her head saying, wait a minute, he just sold out Carl and Earl. They basically are done. They're going to get arrested. They're going to go to jail. He doesn't care. The only thing he cares about is that money and getting out. And how far is it for him to then sell me out on top of that? And it's probably not a far trip for Boyd. So you can see that starting to work through Ava's head a little bit and starting to kind of tie those things together. Like, okay, I can't trust Boyd, but I can trust Zachariah if he's still out there somewhere.
As well as the pressure of finding out that Raylan has the news about where she's at with the federal government.
Exactly. Yeah. And so those things happen. And then, she calls Raylan to set up a meet, or to tell him that Boyd's not going after the truck, and that he's going after the money by other means, but she doesn't know what those means are. Now we know eventually that those means are he's going to kidnap Catherine Hale and just hold her hostage for the money, which is a brilliantly simplistic way to do it. Yeah. He realized, hey, look, Avery really loves this woman. I'm going to be able to get the money out of him by holding her hostage, by threatening to kill her. And so it's quite simple in that regard. And yeah, when Raylan reports back to Vasquez and Rachel that Boyd is not going after the armored car, he's going after the money by other means, they tell him, okay, you keep an eye on Ava, stay out of sight. We want to know what she's doing. And then says that he's going to put Ava back in prison. She's violated her terms of her CI contract, or hasn't lived up to the requirements in her CI contract, and therefore he can put her back in jail, and he's going to put her back in jail. And we've talked about this, throughout the season, this whole concept of, well, what exactly is she going back to jail for, given that we know that she didn't stab the guard. They have no witness who can testify to the body removal situation. I mean, I guess maybe forensically they can tie her to the murder potentially, but we haven't heard anything about that. So I do still wonder sort of what she's going back to jail for. And I wish she had a lawyer. The show goes way differently if Ava has a lawyer who knows that she's an informant.
Yeah, but you don't have the convenience of, what happened to the long hair?
Well, he works for Boyd, though, right? She can't tell him
that's true.
He's an informant. She's an informant. So.
Yeah, that's true. No public defender.
Well, you wouldn't tell a public defender either, but yeah. So that's the situation. Vasquez seems particularly hell-bent on locking up Ava for whatever reason. And he's worried about Raylan. But Raylan and Tim then have a conversation after Raylan hangs up the phone, says, I'm going to go, sit on Ava, and speculates that Boyd might try and suicide by cop. And Tim says, well, hey, look, I hope all this work, I hope we take him alive and get a conviction, man. Otherwise, what are we doing all this for? You can shoot him anytime. And says that, well, I guess that'll be up to him, won't it, Raylan? Instead of being up to Raylan, of course. Because, and I think everyone expects. I know when I was watching this, I expected that this ends only one way, with either Raylan or Boyd dead. I didn't see another way that the series could end.
At this point, yeah, I think that's fair.
At this point, watching it, I didn't see any other option. So, but yeah. So Boyd grabs Catherine Hale and has her calls Markham to tell him to load up the money and bring it to a meeting place that'll give him later. Markham agrees, and Boone helps him load up the cash. But in between all of that, Markham went to visit Loretta's great aunt, who we talked about, Kay Callan, earlier in this episode. And she basically tells him to go fuck himself, but she does it in a much more eloquent, justified way than I did. So I'm going to let her do the talking for us. So I'll have a clip of that.
You don't mind my asking, how is it Loretta ended up in foster care instead of coming here to live with you?
Stuck-up bitch from family services made noises like this place ain't fit for habitation. You believe that? I've been living in this house for 52 goddamn years.
And there was nobody else could have taken her in? No other kin?
Meaning, if tragedy were to strike again, would I stand to inherit my grandniece's property? You think I don't know who you are, Mr. Markham?
Well, I introduced myself at the door.
Not your name. Who you are. What you are.
What's that?
Well, off the top of my head, I'd say a no-count Peckerwood. And that's just for starters.
Ma'am, I'm afraid I've given a misimpression of my intent on coming here to see you.
Oh, I hope so. Because it seems to me you're here to get me to talk Loretta into selling out to you. Or to sell out to you myself once you put her in the ground.
That woman's tougher than a pine knot.
No go, huh? Notice you didn't turn down your single malt.
You ever notice how the necessities of our line of work weigh heavy on your conscience?
Always seemed to me, far as conscience goes, the sweet spot is either be poor enough you can't afford to have one, or rich enough you can afford to hire someone to carry the weight.
I love that line from Boone. It's very, very well written. It's great.
Yeah, very good.
And it look, it applies to criminality, of course, but let's be real here. This applies to the entire world. and to corporations and government and everything else. It's be poor enough not to have to not be able to afford a conscience, or rich enough to be able to hire somebody else to not have a conscience. So it's a great moment. They kill Loretta's great aunt. He says something to Boone about, I know you're fond of the girl, which implies that Loretta's next on that list, unfortunately. So we'll see what happens there. But they then go and load up the cash. There's another great moment with Boone. Again, zealotry, dangerous in all respects. But there's another great moment with Boone where he's helping Markham load up the cash. He asks him, hey, do you want me to come along? And Markham explains, no, he said come alone. They always say that. He probably got it from the movies, and they joke, they laugh about it.
Yeah.
And then he asks him again, hey, do you want me to come along? And Markham says no. And then he asks him, he says, are you not going to try to change my mind? You're not going to try and talk me out of this decision? And he says, hey, look, you're the boss, man. You pay me to do what you say, not to try and change your mind on stuff. You don't pay me to think, you pay me to do, essentially, is what he's saying. And so it really represents kind of how dangerous Boone is. And
you get employee of the month.
Yeah, really. Every month.
Every month.
Picture on the wall.
And he's like ends up murdering people his competitors.
and then we get to see that scene in the diner that we talked about a little bit ago. There was something that happened during that scene that I didn't mention, where he talks about his girl. And he's clearly talking about Loretta.
Yeah.
And he talks about grass on the field and all that. It's very, very uncomfortable. Makes me very squeamish.